Across the endless stars, there was a silence that never used to exist. Once the galaxy was loud with trade, arguments, and the proud boasting of powerful empires. But now, when one name was spoken, voices dropped to whispers, eyes shifted nervously, and halls fell quiet. That name was humanity. No one dared to speak it aloud for too long, as if even the sound of the word might call forth something dark, something that still haunted every empire, every council, and every ruler who had lived. Through the war, the younger races asked questions. They had not seen the war. They had not watched the fire that fell from the skies or the black fleets that moved without mercy. They asked their elders, "Why does no one talk of Earth? Why are humans never mentioned?" And the elders would grow pale and look away. "Do not ask that question," they would say. "Some things are better left buried. Do not speak of them again." But the truth could never stay hidden forever. History has a way of clawing back from the dark. There was a time, not long ago, in the measure of the stars, when the galaxy thought humans were nothing. The great empires laughed at Earth. They called it a small world, backward, fragile, weak, a world divided by petty nations and foolish wars. They thought humanity would never stand against the might of the Council and its fleets. But arrogance is a poison, and the Council drank deeply from it. They believed humanity could be conquered in a single strike. They believed Earth would kneel as all others had before. They were wrong. What came next was not a war as the galaxy understood it. It was something else, something so ruthless that even now, whole species choose silence rather than memory. The galaxy had seen wars before. Empires rose and fell. Battles scarred planets. Fleets clashed in the void, and civilizations bent under the weight of stronger foes. But what happened when the Council moved against humanity was different. It was not a war of conquest. It was not a war of defense. It was a war of survival, fought with a fury that the galaxy had never witnessed before. The whispers say it began with arrogance. The Council sent an ultimatum to Earth. Surrender peacefully. Become a client species. Accept the rules of the galaxy or be destroyed. They expected fear. They expected begging. They expected humans to bow their heads. Instead, something ancient stirred in the heart of humanity. Something that had been forged in the fires of countless wars across their own history. Something that had taught them to fight, not only for victory, but for existence itself. The galaxy did not understand that humans had always fought wars of survival. On Earth, they had battled nature, disease, each other, and time itself. Every century had hardened them, sharpened them, forged them into something the Council did not recognize until it was too late. When the ultimatum reached Earth, there was no surrender, there was no kneeling. There was silence at first, then unity. A unity the galaxy thought impossible for such a divided species. For the first time in their history, humanity stood together as one. From the smallest villages to the greatest cities, from the quiet scientists to the hardened soldiers, all became part of the same cause. And that cause was simple. Humanity would never kneel. The Council did not believe it. They laughed. They sent fleets, powerful armadas that had broken dozens of worlds before. They thought this war would end before it began. But they were not facing another empire. They were facing something else, something the stars themselves would soon tremble to remember. The first fleet moved toward Earth. It never returned. At first, the galaxy thought it was an error, a mistake in communication, a lost signal. But then the rumors spread. Ships gone. Commanders missing. Entire armadas destroyed in silence. It made no sense. The Council sent more fleets, stronger fleets, endless fleets. But each time, humanity answered. Each time, the Council lost more than they could explain. No one knew how humans fought. No one understood the strange mix of strategy, sacrifice, and sheer will that drove them. But the results were always the same. Humanity did not simply win battles. They crushed them. They erased them. And they did so with a cold, ruthless determination that unsettled even the most hardened warriors of the galaxy. The whispers grew, louder, though still no one dared speak openly. "The humans are different," they said. "The humans do not fight like us. They do not think like us. They do not stop." Planets far from the war front began to feel the fear. Traders spoke of human ships appearing in the void without warning. Soldiers whispered of prisoners who fought even in chains, refusing to yield. Rulers trembled as reports arrived of entire fleets burning under the black banners of Earth. And yet, even then, the galaxy did not truly understand. They thought the humans were fighting to win. But that was never the truth. Humanity was not fighting for victory. They were fighting to make a statement, one carved so deep into history that no species would ever forget. They fought to make sure no one would ever dare raise a hand against them again. That was why the war became something different, something darker, something ruthless beyond comprehension. The galaxy learned too late what humanity truly was when cornered. They were not prey. They were not weak. They were predators who had learned long ago how to survive in a world that gave them nothing freely. And when such predators are threatened, they do not merely defend, they destroy. This was only the beginning. The war had only just begun. But already, across the galaxy, voices dropped when the word human was spoken. Already, the Council had begun to fear. Already, the stars themselves seemed to tremble. And those who survived that first year of the war would never forget the feeling that spread through every corner of the galaxy. The sense that something unstoppable had awoken, and that nothing, no empire, no fleet, no council decree, could ever silence it again. The Galactic Council had ruled for thousands of years. It was an alliance of the strongest empires, each older than humanity, each believing they had seen everything the galaxy could offer. They had crushed rebellions, ended wars, and forced entire civilizations to bow. In their arrogance, they believed no new race could surprise them. They thought they understood every possible enemy. But humanity was not like the others. At first, the Council looked at Earth with disdain. The reports described a small planet, rich in water and life, but home to a primitive species divided by borders and politics. Humans had no faster-than-light fleets, no great colonies among the stars, no empire stretching across galaxies. To the Council, Earth was nothing more than a resource waiting to be claimed. They saw no threat, only weakness, and so the Council made a decision that would change the galaxy forever. They sent an ultimatum to Earth. It was written in the cold language of conquerors, demanding surrender and obedience. The humans were to give up their independence, hand over their weapons, and allow the Council to rule them as a client species. In return, Earth would be protected and guided by the wisdom of older races. It was the same demand they had given to countless other worlds. Those worlds had bowed. They had submitted. They had feared the fleets of the Council too much to resist. The Council expected the same from humanity, but what they failed to see was the fire hidden inside this small, divided race. When the message reached Earth, leaders gathered in secret chambers. The people held their breath. There were those who feared surrender was the only option. Against fleets that stretched across the stars, what could humanity hope to do? Yet even as doubt filled the air, something else began to grow. Memories of Earth's long history surfaced. Humanity had faced threats before. Empires had risen and fallen on their own world. Tyrants had demanded submission. Invaders had come with greater numbers and greater weapons. But in the end, humanity had always fought back. They had always resisted. And now, faced with the most powerful empire in the galaxy, that same instinct rose once more. The Council's mistake was believing humanity's divisions made them weak. What they did not understand was that when faced with true danger, humanity had the ability to unite in ways that seemed impossible. For the first time in history, the nations of Earth looked beyond their differences. Old rivals shook hands. Enemies put aside hatred. Armies that once prepared to fight each other now prepared to fight together. The world that the Council thought was weak suddenly became something else, something sharper, something stronger. The Council had expected fear. What they received was silence. When their ambassadors returned with no signed treaty, no bowing leaders, no surrender, the Council was confused. When weeks passed and humanity still gave no answer, the Council grew impatient. And when Earth finally sent a single message back, 4 simple words, the galaxy began to change forever. The message said, "Humanity will not kneel." The Council laughed at first. They saw the defiance as foolishness, the arrogance of a small race that did not know its place. They prepared to teach Earth a lesson. The fleets were gathered, massive, ships bristling with weapons, engines burning with power. The Council's admirals believed it would be swift, a show of force, a single strike, and Earth would fall in line as all others had before. But in their arrogance, the Council failed to see the storm they had awakened. While the fleets assembled, humanity prepared in silence. Their scientists worked day and night, unlocking secrets of technology with desperate speed. Their soldiers, trained with a determination that shocked even their own leaders. Their people, ordinary men and women, began to think not of survival alone, but of victory. The Council thought they were preparing to fight another primitive race. In truth, they were preparing to fight a predator that had been shaped by endless struggle on a harsh world. The Council's mistake was not sending the ultimatum. Their mistake was believing the ultimatum would be accepted. Their mistake was underestimating what desperation could create. When the first fleet was sent toward Earth, it was meant to be a warning. A single armada to frighten humanity into submission. But humanity did not bow. They did not surrender. They fought. And the galaxy would soon discover what it truly meant to fight a war against them. The Council's mistake would echo across generations. For in that moment, when Earth chose defiance instead of obedience, the fate of the galaxy shifted. The rulers who had thought themselves eternal would soon tremble at the name they once mocked. Humanity, the small, fragile species, from a forgotten world, had made their choice. And the Council, in their arrogance, had lit the fire that would consume them all. The first spark came when the Council sent their great armada to Earth. It was meant to be a lesson, not a true war. The Council's admirals believed that a single fleet would crush human defenses and force Earth into surrender. The ships that moved across the stars were immense, each larger than Earth's cities, their weapons capable of tearing apart mountains. They had defeated countless civilizations before. To the Council, Earth was just another primitive world to subdue. But humanity had been waiting. From the moment the ultimatum was given, they knew this day would come. Their scientists, engineers, and soldiers had worked in secret, preparing weapons, strategies, and traps. They studied the few scraps of alien technology they had captured, and they adapted with terrifying speed. What took other races centuries to learn, humans grasped in months. They were desperate, and desperation gave them clarity. When the alien armada entered the solar system, they expected fear. Instead, they were met with silence. Earth looked quiet, almost defenseless. But hidden beneath that quiet was a storm waiting to be unleashed. The Council's fleet moved toward Earth with slow confidence, their commanders certain of victory. They broadcast messages to the planet, giving one last chance to surrender. But humanity gave no reply, and then, when the fleet drew near, the silence broke. human ships emerged. From the shadow of the moon, from the orbit of Mars, from hidden stations scattered across the void. They were smaller, weaker, less advanced than the massive warships of the Council, but they moved with purpose. They struck not with raw strength, but with precision. They targeted supply vessels, communication ships, and command centers. They did not fight like the Council expected. They fought like predators, striking hard, then vanishing into the dark. The battle became chaos. Alien commanders tried to adapt, but every move they made was countered. Human ships sacrificed themselves if it meant crippling a larger enemy. Pilots threw their lives into impossible maneuvers, turning their fragile craft into weapons. Every loss for humanity carried a cost for the Council far greater than they had imagined. And then came the moment that turned the whispers of defiance into a roar. The flagship of the Council fleet, a vessel feared across dozens of worlds, was destroyed by a single coordinated strike from a swarm of human ships. It did not fall to superior weapons or overwhelming firepower. It fell to relentless determination and the willingness of humans to die if it meant victory. The explosion lit up the void, and with it, the galaxy's perception of Earth began to change. Reports of the battle spread quickly. At first, the Council tried to suppress them, but rumors always escaped. Traders whispered that the mighty fleet had been broken. Soldiers muttered that the humans had done the impossible, and among the stars, the first seeds of fear began to grow. Humanity had not only resisted, they had won. But Earth did not celebrate. The cost had been terrible. Entire fleets were lost. Cities on Earth were damaged by orbital strikes, and thousands of lives had been sacrificed. Yet in that sacrifice lay the heart of humanity's strength. They were willing to lose everything if it meant freedom. The Council could not understand this. Other species feared death more than chains, but humans saw death as part of the fight. They carried memories of countless wars on their own soil, and they carried the scars of history with them into the stars. The Council called another meeting after the defeat. The great chamber, once filled with arrogance, now echoed with unease. Voices rose in anger, blaming admirals, blaming faulty intelligence, blaming anything but themselves. Yet beneath the shouting, there was fear. They had faced rebellions before, but never like this. Never an enemy that struck so hard and so fast. Never an enemy that seemed to grow stronger the more they suffered. Some argued for peace, for offering humanity a treaty, but the majority refused. To admit weakness was unthinkable. To allow one small world to defy them would shatter their rule. So they made the second great mistake. Instead of seeking peace, they prepared for war. The Council believed that if one fleet was not enough, then 10 fleets would crush the humans. They believed overwhelming numbers would drown out humanity's spark. What they failed to see was that the spark had already become a flame. On Earth, the victory gave hope. The people, though battered and grieving, now knew they could fight. They had proven to themselves and to the galaxy that they were not prey. They were predators, too. Scientists pushed harder, building new weapons. Engineers created ships faster than ever before. Soldiers trained with a fire in their eyes that no fear could extinguish. Humanity was changing, becoming something greater than the galaxy had ever seen. The first spark of defiance had ignited a fire that would spread across the stars. The Council thought they had faced the worst of it, but in truth, they had only seen the beginning. The humans were not just resisting anymore. They were preparing to fight back with a vengeance that would echo through every corner of the galaxy. The Battle of the First Fleet would be remembered not only as a human victory, but as the moment the galaxy itself began to tremble. For in that battle, the galaxy saw the truth. Humanity was not weak. Humanity was not afraid. Humanity would fight until the stars themselves burned out. And in the dark halls of the Council, where whispers of fear began to creep, The rulers of the galaxy could no longer deny it. The humans were coming. The Council's pride was wounded, but their arrogance still blinded them. The loss of their first fleet shook them, yet they told themselves it was only luck, only chance. Humanity, they believed, had used clever tricks and reckless sacrifices, but tricks could not stand against true power. So the Council gathered more. 10 fleets were assembled, each larger than the one that had been destroyed. Hundreds of warships, thousands of smaller craft, and enough firepower to reduce whole planets to ash. When those fleets moved across the stars toward Earth, the galaxy held its breath. It was not just a battle anymore. It was war. The skies above Earth darkened as alien ships entered orbit, their shadows covering entire continents. For the first time in history, humanity looked up and saw the full weight of the galaxy pressing down upon them. Fear rippled across the planet. But alongside that fear came resolve. Humanity had already tasted victory. They knew the Council could be beaten. And now they were ready to prove it again. The war began with fire. Alien fleets unleashed bombardments from orbit, striking cities, bases, and power grids. Towers of flame rose into the sky as entire regions burned. Earth shook under the assault, and millions cried out in terror. But humanity did not break. They answered with everything they had. Missile silos hidden deep underground erupted, launching waves of weapons into the sky. Swarms of human fighter craft streaked upward, meeting the descending fleets with fury. Civilian factories had been turned into war machines, producing weapons at a pace the Council did not believe possible. Every human hand had a role. Every human mind was turned toward survival. The Council had expected fear and surrender. What they found was chaos and defiance. The battle spread across the solar system. Mars, once a growing colony, became a battlefield, where human ground troops ambushed alien landing parties. The asteroid belt was transformed into a deadly trap, with hidden cannons and explosive charges waiting for alien ships to pass. Even the moons of Jupiter became weapons, hosting missile platforms that struck from impossible angles. Humanity fought not like a single army, but like an entire world that had decided survival was worth any price. And the price was high. Cities on Earth burned, oceans boiled under bombardment, families were torn apart. Yet every loss only sharpened humanity's will. They had been underestimated once, and they would never allow it again. Alien commanders grew frustrated. They had expected quick victory, but every step forward was met with resistance. Human soldiers fought with a determination they could not understand. Even when surrounded, even when outnumbered, they fought until the last breath. Prisoners refused to surrender information, sometimes choosing death over silence. To the Council, this defiance seemed madness. To humanity, it was survival. The war dragged on, and with each passing day, whispers spread through the galaxy. Traders carried stories of human victories. Refugees from the Council's own fleet spoke of human cunning and traps that destroyed ships many times their size. Other species, once silent, began to wonder if the Council was not invincible after all. And still, the war grew darker. Humanity's leaders realized they could not win by defense alone. They had to strike back. They had to take the fight beyond their world, and so they did. Human fleets, once thought too small to matter, began to raid alien supply lines. They struck convoys in deep space, leaving nothing behind but wreckage. They attacked outposts, dismantled communication hubs, and disappeared before reinforcements could arrive. The galaxy, for the first time in centuries, saw the Council bleed. It was not only a war for survival now, it was a war for memory, a war to carve humanity's name into the stars with fire and blood. The Council doubled their efforts. Fleets poured into human space, bringing destruction on a scale Earth had never endured. Millions more died. Great cities were turned to ruins. Yet even in ruin, humanity did not bow. They built weapons from the wreckage. They turned broken ships into traps. They fought with teeth and fire when nothing else remained. The galaxy began to whisper a new word alongside human. That word was ruthless. For humanity was no longer fighting like prey. They were fighting like predators who refused to die. The war stretched on, longer than anyone expected. The Council lost ships faster than they could replace them. Human fleets, though smaller, moved like shadows, striking and vanishing. Planets once loyal to the Council began to question their rulers. If the mighty fleets could not crush a single world, what power did the Council truly have? In the Council chamber, voices of doubt grew louder. Some rulers demanded peace, fearing that continued war would only weaken them further. But others, still blinded by pride, demanded total destruction of Earth. They could not admit defeat, not to a species they once called primitive. And so the war continued. Humanity grew stronger with every battle. Their scientists advanced faster under pressure than anyone thought possible. They created weapons that adapted mid-fight, ships that could outmaneuver giants, and strategies that no alien mind could predict. They learned, they adapted, and they endured. The galaxy had thought the war would be short. Instead, it became something much larger, something darker, something that would leave scars across the stars for centuries to come. And at the heart of it all was humanity, standing against the most powerful empire the galaxy had ever known. The war had begun, and already the galaxy trembled. What no one realized then was that this was only the opening act. The true storm had not yet arrived. For humanity was only beginning to show how far they were willing to go. And when the galaxy finally understood, it would already be too late. The galaxy had seen many wars before, but never like this. Humanity had already shown they would not bow, but now they revealed something far more dangerous. They revealed how ruthless they could be when pushed to the edge. For every human city burned, for every life lost, Earth struck back with fury tenfold. The Council had thought they were fighting a primitive race. What they did not understand was that they were awakening something far older, far darker, hidden deep within the human spirit. At first, humanity fought for survival. But as the war dragged on, survival was no longer enough. Humanity wanted to make a statement. They wanted to ensure that never again would the galaxy dare to raise its fleets against them. The answer humanity gave was not mercy, not negotiation, but cold, relentless destruction. Human scientists pushed beyond limits no other species dared to cross. They built weapons that defied every rule of war. They created ships designed not just to fight, but to kill in silence, to strike terror before the enemy even saw them. Entire fleets vanished without a trace, and when fragments were found drifting in space, alien crews spoke of attacks that came from nowhere, weapons that pierced shields as if they were nothing, and shadows that moved faster than light. Humanity's tactics became infamous. They no longer met alien fleets head-on. Instead, they dismantled them piece by piece. A supply convoy would vanish, then a communications hub, then a fuel depot. By the time the Council realized what was happening, their fleets were starving, cut off, blind, and vulnerable. Then the humans would strike with full force, wiping out entire armadas before they could even regroup. Alien commanders began to refuse assignments to human fronts. Some deserted. Others begged the Council to reconsider, but the Council could not admit weakness. To admit defeat would unravel their rule. And so they sent more fleets, more soldiers, more ships into the grinder. And the grinder was humanity. Stories began to spread across the galaxy. Stories of human soldiers who fought even when their weapons were broken, using their bare hands to drag enemies down with them. Stories of human ships ramming alien cruisers at full speed, sacrificing themselves to destroy giants. Stories of prisoners who remained silent under torture, their only answer being a cold smile that terrified their captors. These stories grew into legend, and legends spread faster than truth. Whole planets whispered about the humans, and children were warned never to speak their name too loudly. "Do not anger them," the elders said. "Do not draw their gaze." And yet, the council still believed they could win through numbers. They sent one of their largest fleets ever assembled, thousands of ships, to strike Earth directly. They expected to finally crush humanity beneath overwhelming power. But humanity was ready. They had been preparing for this moment. When the fleet entered the solar system, they found not a frightened world, but a trap. The humans had filled the system with weapons, mines hidden in asteroid fields, automated cannons on moons, stealth ships waiting in the dark. The alien fleet never stood a chance. It was not a battle. It was an execution. Hours after the fighting began, the great fleet was reduced to burning wreckage. Survivors fled, carrying with them a horror they could not put into words. The galaxy gasped. If the Council's greatest fleet could be destroyed, what hope was there for anyone else? But humanity was not done. For the first time, they took the war beyond defense. Human fleets pushed into alien space. They struck colonies, burned supply depots, and dismantled outposts. They did not seek to conquer. They sought to make the galaxy remember. Each world they touched was left with scars so deep that no one would forget who had made them. Entire cities were turned to ash, not because humanity needed to, but because they wanted to send a message. Never again. Alien leaders began to plead with the Council. They begged for peace. They begged for an end to the war before their civilizations were destroyed. But humanity had no mercy left. Their answer was silence, followed by fire. They did not negotiate. They did not forgive. They only pressed forward, leaving destruction in their wake. Even the Council itself began to fracture. Some rulers realized the truth, that humanity could not be broken. Others, blinded by pride, demanded more fleets, more sacrifice, more blood. But it no longer mattered what the Council wanted. The war was no longer in their control. It belonged to humanity now. Across the stars, fear became universal. It was no longer just the Council who trembled. Neutral species, traders, and empires far from the conflict began to whisper in dread. They spoke of humanity as if they were not merely a species but a force of nature, something unstoppable, something inevitable. The war had begun as a test, but now it had become a lesson written in blood and fire. Humanity's ruthless answer to the Council's arrogance was clear. If the galaxy wanted to make them kneel, then the galaxy would burn before that happened. And as the wreckage of fleets drifted silently through the void, one truth became undeniable. The galaxy had awakened a predator it did not understand, and now it could never put it back to sleep. The galaxy had always believed the Council was eternal. For thousands of years, its fleets had ruled the stars, its laws had bound countless species, and its power had seemed unshakable. But now, cracks were spreading. Fleets that once inspired fear were nothing but wreckage drifting in space. Colonies that once pledged loyalty now whispered of rebellion. Planets that once feared the Council now feared humanity more. Everywhere the galaxy trembled. Humanity's ruthless war had changed everything. Alien commanders who once marched with pride now looked over their shoulders, fearing the sudden appearance of human ships. Traders altered their routes, terrified of passing near human space. Entire empires began to collapse, not under humanity's direct assault, but under the weight of fear. Rumors moved faster than ships. Some said humans had built weapons that could shatter stars. Others claimed their soldiers were not mortal, but demons who could not be killed. No one knew what was true anymore, but everyone believed the whispers, and fear was spreading like wildfire. In the council chamber, panic was growing. Reports arrived daily of destroyed fleets, vanished convoys, and entire sectors cut off from communication. The council's leaders shouted over one another, demanding answers, demanding solutions. But there were none. The council had always ruled through fear, but now they were the ones who were afraid. They feared humanity, not only because of their victories, but because of their unpredictability. The humans fought in ways no alien mind could fully understand. They sacrificed without hesitation, turned their own pain into weapons, and struck in places no one thought possible. They were not playing the same game as the rest of the galaxy. They were rewriting it. On Earth, the war had scarred the people, but it had also hardened them. Families who had lost everything still supported the fight. Factories worked without pause, churning out new weapons, new ships, new machines of war. Scientists who once dreamed of peaceful futures now created tools of destruction with single-minded focus. Every human heart carried grief, but that grief had been transformed into fury. The galaxy had wanted to break them, but instead, it had forged them into something far stronger. And now, that strength was spilling across the stars. Human fleets, once tiny and fragile, now moved like storms. They struck deep into alien space, destroying shipyards, torching strongholds, and dismantling fleets before they could even form. Each victory shook the galaxy further. Alien rulers sent desperate messages to the Council, begging for help, but the Council no longer had the power to protect them. And so entire civilizations bent their knees not to the Council, but to the shadow of humanity. Better to submit than to be destroyed. The galaxy's balance of power was breaking. In marketplaces, aliens spoke in hushed voices. In schools, children whispered stories of the humans who came like fire. Even the bravest warriors admitted, when alone, that they dreaded the thought of facing a human fleet. Fear was no longer just fear. It had become belief. Belief that humanity was unstoppable. Belief that resistance was useless. Belief that the galaxy itself was trembling. And it was not just words. Signs of collapse appeared everywhere. Pirates, who once preyed on trade routes, now avoided human sectors entirely. Neutral empires built defenses not against the Council, but against humanity. In distant worlds, leaders ordered the removal of human records, believing that even speaking the name might draw their wrath. The galaxy shook not because humanity had conquered it, but because humanity had proven what no one else could. The Council was not invincible. The rulers of the galaxy were vulnerable, and if humanity could strike them down, then perhaps anyone could. The chain of fear that had bound the stars for centuries was broken, and nothing could restore it. But in the center of this storm, humanity did not stop. Their leaders knew the truth. Fear was not enough. If they left the war unfinished, one day the Council would rise again. One day, the galaxy might forget. And so humanity pressed forward. No mercy, no hesitation, no surrender. The galaxy shook, and the shaking only grew stronger. Fleets that once moved proudly now scattered. Entire regions fell silent, their people too terrified to even speak. And in that silence, the whispers spread. Humanity was coming. Humanity was relentless. Humanity could not be stopped. Even the stars seemed to tremble. For the first time in recorded history, the galaxy felt powerless before a single species. And deep within every alien heart, a new fear took root. The fear that humanity's war was not about survival anymore. It was about making the galaxy remember, forever. The galaxy had always believed its great empires were unshakable. They had stood for thousands of years, holding countless worlds under their banners, demanding tribute and loyalty. They had crushed rebellions, silenced dissent, and forced whole species into chains. But now, under the shadow of humanity's war, those same empires began to crumble. It did not happen all at once. At first, it was whispers, Governors on distant worlds refused to send ships to the Council, fearing they would be thrown into the fire against humanity. Soldiers deserted, fleeing their posts rather than face human fleets. Civilian populations demanded protection, not from raiders or rebels, but from the humans who struck like lightning across the stars. Slowly, piece by piece, the Council's control began to break apart. Humanity had not conquered these empires with armies or invasions. They had broken them with fear. The first empire to fall was one of the Council's strongest allies, the Valari Dominion. For centuries, they had been known for their discipline and their powerful fleets. But when the humans struck at their borders, something strange happened. The Valari fleets did not answer the call to fight. Instead, they retreated, abandoning colonies to burn. Their admirals knew the truth. Facing humanity meant destruction, and so the mighty Dominion crumbled from within. Entire planets rose up, declaring independence rather than sacrifice themselves in a hopeless war. Soon after, other empires followed. The Zorthan regime, once proud and merciless, collapsed as its leaders turned on each other, each blaming the other for losses against humanity. Their worlds split apart in civil war, too weak to resist human fleets when they came. The Council watched in horror as allies they had trusted for centuries fell one by one, and with each collapse, humanity grew stronger. They did not simply destroy fleets. They shattered entire power structures. Every empire that crumbled sent a new message to the galaxy. The Council could not protect you. Humanity was the new force to fear. Across the stars, rebellion spread like wildfire. Species long crushed under the weight of the Council saw their chance. They rose up, overthrowing governors, destroying outposts, and joining the chaos. The galaxy was burning, and at its center, humanity pushed forward without pause. On Earth, there was no celebration. The people carried grief with them always. The cost of victory had been heavy, but they did not allow themselves to stop. They had lost too much to turn back. Factories worked night and day, producing fleets, faster than ever. Children grew up with war as their only memory, their only purpose. Humanity was no longer just fighting a war. They were becoming something else, something larger, something unstoppable. The Council was desperate. They tried to hide the truth, tried to silence reports, but the collapse was too great to conceal. The archives recorded words no one had ever expected to see. The Council is losing. Those words shook the galaxy to its core. Never before had the Council lost so much, so fast. They had been weakened not just by humanity's weapons, but by humanity's refusal to break. Alien leaders begged the Council to surrender, but surrender was not in the Council's nature. They could not admit defeat. They could not allow one small world to undo thousands of years of rule. And so they demanded more. More fleets, more soldiers, more blood. But there was nothing left to give. The empires were broken, their fleets gone, their worlds in rebellion. The Council had no answer. Humanity did. Their fleets pushed deeper, striking the heart of the Council's territory. They attacked shipyards, obliterated supply hubs, and left nothing standing. They did not conquer worlds. They burned them. They wanted the galaxy to understand, to never forget. Mercy was gone. Only fear remained. Entire systems surrendered. Without a fight, their people too terrified to resist. Children grew up whispering human legends as if they were nightmares come alive. Even the bravest rulers trembled, knowing that if they resisted, humanity would come for them next. The galaxy was breaking. Empires that had lasted for ages were reduced to ruins. And in the middle of it all, humanity stood unbroken. They had taken every loss, every scar, and turned it into strength. The Council's mistake had not just been arrogance. Their mistake had been creating an enemy who could not be defeated, an enemy who would rather burn the stars themselves than kneel. And now, the Council was learning that lesson too late. The great empires were falling, the galaxy was trembling, and in the silence left behind, only one name remained, spoken in whispers that carried both fear and awe: humanity. The galaxy was falling into silence, but it was not the silence of peace. It was the silence of fear, the silence that comes when voices are too afraid to speak. The Council still tried to command, still tried to send orders across the stars, but their words carried no weight, no strength, for their allies were gone, their fleets broken, and their once loyal subjects too terrified to answer. In market halls and starports, where once chatter filled the air, now whispers were the only sound, and those whispers always circled back to one word, one name, the name of humanity. But the name was never spoken loudly, never in the open, for to say it aloud was to invite dread, as though the very sound might summon the wrath of human fleets. Entire cultures began to forbid the word from being spoken. In schools, alien teachers told their students that the name was forbidden, that it belonged to shadows, that to even think of it was dangerous. Libraries removed records, databases erased history, statues were toppled, and all that remained was silence. Yet the silence itself was heavy with the weight of the truth everyone already knew. Humanity had become not just an enemy, not just a rival, but a force of nature, something vast and unstoppable, like fire or storms, something that could not be reasoned with, only feared. The Council's last loyal rulers tried to fight this spreading fear, but the harder they tried, the stronger it grew. They sent messages declaring that humanity was weak, that their victories were only luck, but when fleets were sent to prove these words, they never returned. Sometimes the wreckage drifted back into known space, burned and shattered, a warning carved into metal. Sometimes nothing returned at all, leaving only silence. And so the fear grew until it was no longer just fear, it became belief. The belief that humanity was everywhere, that they could strike at any time, that they heard every whisper, saw every rebellion, felt every thought. Superstitions spread through the stars. Some said that even to dream of humanity was dangerous. Some said that if you spoke their name 3 times aloud, a fleet would appear at your world's orbit. Others said humanity had no need of ships anymore, that they had become something beyond flesh and steel, something that moved through shadows, through thought, through fear itself. No one knew the truth, but no one dared to test it. Meanwhile, humanity itself watched this fear grow and did not try to stop it. For them, fear was the strongest weapon they had. They knew they could not fight the entire galaxy forever, not with ships, not with soldiers, but with fear they could break civilizations, without firing a single shot. And so they let the galaxy tremble, let the silence spread, let the name vanish from speech. On Earth, leaders studied reports of alien worlds where even children refused to speak the human name. And they did not smile, they did not laugh, for they carried too much grief in their hearts, but they understood the power of what was happening. They had wanted survival, but now survival had turned into something else. Now, humanity was becoming a myth, a legend of dread. Alien rulers who once mocked Earth now refused to even look in its direction. They ordered their maps redrawn, leaving human space marked only by empty darkness, as though to hide it would make it vanish. But darkness cannot be hidden, it only spreads. The Council itself began to fracture under this silence. Some members still called for war, for final strikes, for desperate attempts to prove strength, but others whispered of surrender, of abandoning their throne before humanity came. For them, too, those who spoke of surrender were silenced quickly, some exiled, some executed. But the whispers did not die. They multiplied. For even within the heart of the Council itself, fear had taken root. And yet, even in silence, the truth could not be erased. Records could be destroyed, names forbidden, But every species carried memory, and memory does not vanish so easily. In the dark corners of alien cities, parents warned their children not to anger the stars, not to challenge the silent. Name. In the deep halls of military academies, cadets whispered stories of human battles, of fleets that burned stronger enemies to ash. And among rebels, among those who had always hated the council, the silence carried a different meaning. For them, the silence was proof. Proof that even the strongest rulers could fall. Proof that humanity had broken the chains of fear. Proof that anyone could rise if they had the strength to endure. To some, humanity was terror. To others, humanity was hope. But to everyone, humanity was a name no one dared to speak aloud. And so the galaxy entered an age of trembling, where silence spoke louder than words, where whispers carried across stars, and where the shadow of humanity grew larger with every passing day. The council still sat upon its throne, but it was a throne of ash, a throne that could collapse at any moment, and deep down, every alien ruler knew that the silence would not protect them forever. For one day, the name that no one dared to speak would be spoken again, not in fear, but by the humans themselves. And when that day came, the galaxy would remember what it had tried so hard to erase. Humanity was not gone. Humanity was coming. Humanity was the storm waiting in the silence. The council had once stood as the highest power in the galaxy, their throne glittering with the wealth of countless worlds, their word carrying the force of entire fleets, their authority unquestioned for thousands of years. But now their great hall was filled not with confidence but with fear. The chamber that once echoed with speeches of power now echoed with arguments, shouts, and desperate whispers. Representatives of empires that still clung to the council's banner stood at their stations, but their faces carried terror, their voices shook, their eyes darted as if shadows themselves held danger. Reports arrived every day, each one worse than the last. Fleets gone missing, worlds falling silent, rebellions spreading like wildfire, and everywhere whispers of the one enemy none dared name aloud. Humanity had broken them, not just in battle, but in spirit. The council tried to hide the truth, but the truth could not be hidden, not anymore. In the farthest colonies, governors declared independence, their flags torn down, their loyalty abandoned. In once mighty empires, civil wars erupted as leaders turned against each other, fighting for scraps of power before the humans arrived. Even the most loyal fleets refused orders, their admirals vanishing into the dark, their soldiers fleeing into exile. The council sat in its great hall and realized it commanded nothing but shadows. Yet still, some among them refused to admit defeat. They shouted for one last stand, one last gathering of all remaining fleets to crush humanity once and for all. They called the humans weak, called them lucky, called them a mistake that could be erased if only the council stood together. But their words rang hollow, for the others remembered too well the burning of their ships, the destruction of their armies, the terror of seeing humanity fight without fear. One by one, voices fell silent. Then came the moment that shattered the council completely. A fleet of their finest ships had been sent in secret to strike deep into human territory, a desperate gamble to destroy Earth itself, to cut off the enemy's heart and show the galaxy that the council still had teeth. They had sent their most advanced warships, their most loyal admirals, their most experienced soldiers. For weeks, no word returned until at last a signal came. It was not a victory, it was a warning. The message played in the council chamber, a recording filled with static and broken voices. We are surrounded. They're ships. They are everywhere. This is no fleet. This is a storm. Then came silence, followed by one last sound, the crackle of fire and the deep groan of a dying ship, and then nothing. The council hall froze. The fleet they had built their hopes upon was gone, erased in the dark as though it had never existed. The Council's mask of strength shattered in that instant. Panic erupted. Some demanded surrender. Some demanded escape. Others screamed accusations, pointing claws, talons, and hands at one another, blaming each other for the disaster. Chaos filled the hall, and it was then, at the height of confusion, that the humans struck. Their fleets appeared not at the edges of space, not at the borders, but at the very heart of the Council's territory. They moved like shadows through the dark, bypassing defenses, ignoring patrols, until suddenly, entire worlds near the Council. Capital burned with human fire. Their fleets carried banners black as the void, marked with the simple emblem of Earth, a symbol now feared across all stars. Panic spread faster than fire. Civilian ships clogged the lanes of space, fleeing in every direction, trampling one another in desperation. Governors abandoned their posts. Soldiers mutinied, unwilling to throw themselves into hopeless battles. The Council called for resistance, but none came. Their words were empty, their orders meaningless. The enemy they had once mocked was now the master of fear itself, and fear was stronger than any fleet. At last, the humans reached the Council capital. The greatest fortress in the galaxy, protected by rings of warships, planetary shields, and defense platforms, now stood alone, abandoned by allies, deserted by fleets. The Council gathered in their throne room, trembling beneath their ancient banners, waiting for the storm they had summoned. When the human fleet appeared, it did not come with endless demands or speeches. It came with silence. Silent ships filled the skies, dark against the stars, their weapons locked on the capital. No messenger came forward, no ultimatum was given. Humanity spoke only with their presence, and their silence was louder than any threat. The Council's leaders looked upon one another, and in that silence they understood. Their empire was gone. Their power was broken. Their name would be remembered only as a ruin, a warning, a shadow of what once was. For thousands of years, they had ruled the galaxy with arrogance, crushing any who defied them, believing themselves eternal, untouchable, invincible. But now, as human fleets hovered over their last refuge, the truth was undeniable. The Council had fallen. Across the galaxy, billions watched, their eyes fixed on the collapse of the great rulers they had once feared, their hearts filled with a new fear, a fear far deeper, for if the Council could fall, then nothing stood against humanity. And in that moment, the galaxy truly understood what it meant to tremble at a name no one dared to speak. Humanity had not just defeated the Council, they had ended it. And in the silence that followed, the galaxy held its breath, waiting to see what humanity would do next. The galaxy had never known such quiet. After the fall of the Council, after the destruction of their fleets, after the shattering of empires that had ruled for thousands of years, the stars themselves seemed to hold their breath. No ships moved. Through the lanes once crowded with commerce and war, no governors spoke from their thrones. No banners flew above cities on worlds that had once belonged to the Council. Only silence remained, a silence that pressed upon every planet, every moon, every star heavy with the memory of fear. Humanity did not rush to fill the void. They did not conquer with armies or build empires in the traditional sense. They had no desire for gold, no need for tribute, no hunger for dominion. They had fought and destroyed the Council not for power, but to survive, to send a message that the galaxy would remember forever. And now, in the calm that followed, that message had been delivered. Across the galaxy, the last rulers who still lingered in their seats knew that resistance was pointless. Humanity had proven that no force, no alliance, no strategy could stop them. The stories traveled faster than any fleet could. Tales of cities defended by a single human ship against dozens of alien warships, of pilots who sacrificed themselves to save entire colonies, of weapons that could strike from impossible distances, and of humans who never surrendered even when the odds were beyond imagination. These stories became legends, whispered across the void, shaping the new reality of the stars. And yet, humanity did not celebrate. On Earth, the people mourned what had been lost. Millions of lives, countless. Cities, entire fleets of ships destroyed. The victory had come at a cost that could never be forgotten. But from the sorrow came strength. Humanity had endured, and endurance had become their greatest weapon. They rebuilt what could be rebuilt, healed what could be healed, and remembered everything else. In the silence, they watched the galaxy. No fleet dared approach human space. No alien empire raised its banners. Even the planets that had once trembled under council rule now whispered in awe and fear. The age of silence was not peace. It was a warning. Humanity had set the rules now, and the galaxy would follow them, or it would fall. Across the stars, scattered colonies began to speak cautiously of the humans, always careful not to raise attention, always careful not to invite the shadows they had learned to fear. Some hoped to negotiate, others plotted in secret, but none dared act openly. The galaxy had learned that one world, one species, could change the course of history if it fought with enough will, and humanity had fought with everything. Even as silence reigned, new fleets were built, new weapons tested, new strategies prepared. Humanity knew the galaxy would not remain still forever. Somewhere in distant sectors, remnants of empires plotted, remnants of fleets gathered, remnants of soldiers trained. And when the time came that someone, somewhere, dared to challenge them again, humanity would be ready. The Council's fall had been complete, but the lesson remained unbroken. The galaxy belonged to no one except those who were willing to fight, to endure, and to become legends in the shadow of their own fear. On Earth, the leaders looked to the stars, knowing that the victory was not the end. It was a beginning, a chance to shape the galaxy not through tyranny or chains, but through strength, resilience, and the certainty that humanity would never bow. Across the cosmos, silence reigned. But it was a tense silence, filled with anticipation, filled with dread, filled with the knowledge that the name of humanity carried weight beyond measure. And in that silence, every species, every colony, every world understood one truth. The galaxy had changed forever, and no empire, no fleet, no council could ever rise to command it again. Humanity had endured. Humanity had survived. Humanity had become the shadow that moved through the stars, the storm no one could stop, the name no one dared to speak aloud. And as the first whispers of dawn touched the skies of Earth, the people looked outward, not with fear, not with greed, not with arrogance, but with readiness. They knew the galaxy had watched, and the galaxy had trembled. The age of silence had begun, but it was not empty. It was a silence that carried a warning, a promise, and a power that would shape the stars for generations to come. Humanity had risen from ashes, war, and blood, and now, in the quiet that followed, the galaxy would learn to remember that they were never alone. For humanity was not just a species. Humanity was a force, a reckoning, and the echo of their war would be felt across the stars forever.